I've been part of the Sofia community since 2015 when I joined the Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology program as a student. And I've been teaching now for Sofia for about 6 years, since 2018 when I graduated. I serve now as core faculty for the program and as the clinical coordinator, where I help students to understand their requirements for the practicum experience, which involves actually getting to go and do field work with clients as a part of the degree. So students can have all kinds of different practicum experiences, whether they're going to be working at a community mental health agency or working maybe at a school. So students get to choose the kind of practicum experience that most interests them as far as their work as a starting practitioner in the field of mental health. Yes, so there's flexibility as far as what student interests might be, and something that I love about working for Sofia is that we're always encouraging students to acknowledge their strengths, honor their growth edges, and learn what it will mean for them to expand as a human being, and of course, along with that, to be expanding their professional identity and what it means to be serving as a mental health provider. So when students are considering their practicum experience, they might have a very fixed idea about, I want to definitely work with adults, I want to work with couples, and I know that's what I want to do, and that's going to be my practicum experience. Well, that's wonderful to have that sense of confidence and what it is that you feel like you're called to, and it might not practically happen that way, that there'll be something available. So it's about recognizing what's making us decide that that is what we have to do or else, and that needs to be our practicum experience, for example, versus having more of that flexibility or that self-awareness about, okay, well, what is it that's driving me to feel that not only that's something I'm called to, but also that I feel like I must do that. And would it be possible maybe to consider working, as I did, for example, at a middle school, which was the last place that I decided that I had thought I wanted to work for my practicum experience. Yeah. I think part of what I love about my role is that yes, it's incumbent upon me to let students know what those rigid requirements are for their state or their location, as far as what needs to be done to satisfy the requirements for a clinical mental health degree, and to let students know that there's flexible ways to accomplish those requirements. So it's the equivalent of saying, do we have to provide therapy that's only talk therapy, or can we also be engaging in expressive arts as a way to provide therapy? And the answer is, of course, that we can offer expressive arts, and many programs don't even teach or integrate the expressive arts into their curriculum. And so we can accomplish working with clients in a clinical capacity, doing the kind of work that we at Sofia have trained ourselves and taught students about engaging in, whether that's forms of movement, embodiment, integrating dramatic improvisation, which is something I love to teach, so which fits into drama therapy, or going into some more of the more kind of traditional approaches to meditation and mindfulness and how they can be applicable in a clinical setting. So yes, the practicum hours that a student might need to graduate are the same hours, and yet we provide multiple ways to be able to accomplish those practicum hours and to work with clients in ways that honor them as a whole person who is capable of change and transformation. Yeah, in this moment, I think, well, one of the things I'll say that I have heard from the sites, the clinical placements where students have worked, which makes Sofia different, is that we as a university are less rigid about what students will have to prove to us in terms of their practicum experience with a site. So, for example, a lot of universities require that there be a certain recording or number of recordings of sessions in order to substantiate the experience, which on the one hand sounds like it builds value on the one hand. On the other hand, for the site, doing a certain kind of recording might actually not be in line with their values or the way that they run their program. So we actually work with sites to get a better understanding of how they deliver a training program to students who are finishing a master's program or even a doctoral program in counseling. And so that kind of flexibility is something that they appreciate, because we offer that to sites the same way that we offer to students. And on the student end, I would say what sets us apart is that we provide all of the clinical tools that would be required to work with clients in a way that would meet or satisfy a lot of clinical supervisors' wants for their supervisees, or what would be required competencies. And we go above and beyond that, because we teach not just how to make it look like we're sitting with clients and to be knowing how to diagnose clients, but to recognize what a diagnosis means on multiple levels, including at the spiritual level, how a diagnosis can be beneficial and also maybe detrimental, how to frame a diagnosis for a client whose worldview might not accommodate a certain diagnosis, way to understand it. So we can speak to those things and use the necessary vocabulary to be conversant with our field in a clinical way, as well as honoring all aspects of the human experience that would be benefiting from that. Yes, the first word that came up for me when you were explaining that was mindfulness, because mindfulness is a term that has become so popular in the past decade or so in the mainstream, and yet it is a term that comes directly from the Eastern philosophy and religious and spiritual traditions, and yet somehow it took being very structured in a very Western psychological approach, very structured about the application of mindfulness in order to somehow legitimize it. Well, it was already legitimate. It was just that there was this need to kind of codify what it meant to engage a client in mindfulness, which it's helpful in so many ways, and yet there is no such thing as perfect documentation of human experience, which is of course fluid and always changing, dynamic. And I think that in an important way, Sofia helps to kind of let students recognize what is ineffable, what transcends the possibility of documentation, but how we can articulate for the necessary purposes what it is that a client's expressing in multiple domains of experience, work-related, school-related, family-related, partnership-related, and maybe their spiritual community as well. Yes, so the reason that I love improvisation so much is that it honors the fact that ultimately what happens in a therapy session, it essentially is a human experience play space. And I say play space not to minimize that some of the content and material that comes into a therapy session can be incredibly intense, can relate to traumatic events in somebody's life, grief, that they have lost somebody. What makes it a play space and why improvisation is important is because it allows us to, in a very focused and intentional way, hone in on very subtle aspects of our moment-to-moment experiencing. And so, in the framework of, let's say, someone having an argument with their spouse, if this is my individual client, I can then offer them an opportunity to play or engage in a version of their reality as if they are taking on the role of their partner. So in improv, we might say, okay, so you explained that your husband said this to you. Let's see what happens if you take on the role of your husband, including all of what that entails, which might be posture, the way that they're speaking, the one line that stands out for you that bothers you when you come up with a memory that's upsetting or something that recently happened, a recent experience. And we're taking this and we're honing in on all of its constituting elements so that somebody will gain insight into not just more about their own lived experience of it, but also will offer perspective about what it is that in this example, their husband might be experiencing of it. When we can offer not just the intellectual experience of that, but also an embodied experience of that, it changes people.